South Africa has not delivered on its promises to guarantee inclusive education for children with disabilities. That's according to Human Rights Watch. The group has called on President Cyril Ramaphosa to prioritize those with disabilities during his new term of office. Around 600,000 children with disabilities have never been to school in South Africa. Well, for more on this, we are joined via Skype by Human Rights Watch researcher Ms. Elin Martinez. Ms. Martinez, good morning and thank you very much for your time. Just reading your press release and your statement about the state of affairs regarding including children with disabilities in education is not painting a pretty picture.
It really isn't a pretty picture at all for the majority of children with disabilities who are really left out of school or out of quality education in line with what is the right. As we said in our report, the majority of children with disabilities and young people with disabilities are being shortchanged from education, as well as the opportunities that arise from getting a quality education. And this is something that we found in 2015 across the whole country, and a lot of disability rights groups and inclusive education experts continue to find this. And yet there hasn't really been an active effort to ensure that children with disabilities access their equal right to inclusive education.
In 2019, you spent some time talking to a group of parents, I think about 26 parents of children with disabilities in Orange Farm, a township just south of Johannesburg. And when I read about what some of the parents were saying, it's really heartbreaking.
It really is. I mean, and I should just say, I actually was in Orange Farm in 2014 and 2015 visiting some of these parents, but also their children with disabilities. Some of their children are now over 18. They had been waiting for a school that would enroll them around Orange Farm or elsewhere. Mind you, some of these parents and their children have to travel up to an hour every day to access a special school, even though most of them should be able to access a mainstream school in Orange Farm. Now, what is really heartbreaking is that a lot of the parents and the young people themselves feel that the school that they have been sent to is really not giving them any form of quality education. They're not able to read and write, even though these are basic things that should be guaranteed to any child in South Africa. And there has been such little attention to their education that many of them have actually opted to take them out of school, try to find them another school. And this is not something unique to Orange Farm. This is something that happens across the entire country, where parents with disabilities, of children with disabilities, have to go the extra mile to actually secure some form of education, let alone quality education for their children with disabilities.
You know, what is strange here is that the governing party, even in its recent manifesto during the elections we've just had in the country, it commits to the needs, to addressing the needs of people with disability in all government programs. In the past, the government has been heard to be saying the right kinds of things, describing the plans for children and young people with disabilities, but the implementation is not happening. Now, you from Human Rights Watch, with this research, you are now calling on the new government of President Ramaphosa to prioritize the needs of children with disabilities. Exactly what do you want him to focus on?
Well, for one, we want him to ensure that the education system, and so the Department of Basic Education, accepts its obligation to ensure that all children with disabilities are in school. And the government has adopted policies. It has, talked about plans, etc., but it has failed to implement them properly. Now, ensuring access to children with disabilities to education doesn't mean just ticking the box of them enrolling in school. It's about building quality education in all mainstream schools across the country, in all ordinary schools, to ensure that all children with and without disabilities are benefiting equally from education. Now, that requires a mind shift in the president and his future ministers' thinking. It's about securing inclusion within education systems so that all children, regardless of their barriers, can learn equally. It's not about investing more money in special schools or schools that will isolate children with disabilities further. It's about reinvesting all of that into the mainstream education system so that ordinary schools are being built up with quality. Now, that will benefit all children across South Africa, and I think that's an investment that President Ramaphosa really needs to focus on to lift the education system in the country, as he has rightly pointed out.
And finally, very briefly, you've also made the point that while government is committed to no-fee schools as of this year for special needs schools, that is yet still to be implemented.
Yes, and this is unacceptable. I mean, we raised this with the government in 2015 when we released this report for the first time. We said, actually, a lot of children with disabilities are being discriminated against on their most basic right, the right that almost all children across South Africa have access to. And yet this system has been maintained for many, many years. Now, what we highlighted last week is that this promise was made in Geneva before the United Nations, an expert committee. And yet we're in 2019, halfway almost through this academic year, and children with disabilities are paying exorbitant fees to go to public schools. And yet, I mean, this is the reason why we feel that President Ramaphosa needs to prioritize this as a very basic aspect of fulfillment of the right to education in the country.
Thank you very much, Elin Martinez, researcher with the Human Rights Watch, just sharing us some more about this bleak picture of how in South Africa children with disabilities are being shortchanged.